Oh, please take a seat. And we're ready to get started. Everyone who's here with us in person in this room and everyone who's online with us today as well. We are so excited to be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Center for Latin American Studies. My name is Colin Deeds. I'm just going to introduce our opening speaker for today, Janine Relly. She is the Associate Dean of Faculty Affairs and Advancement at the College of Social Behavioral Sciences. She's also a professor of journalism, a founding director of the Global Studies in Journalism program, as well as an affiliate with our center and a longtime collaborator and supporter of the Center for Latin American Studies and the college and the university. So Janine, thank you so much for agreeing to be with us to kind of kick things off and welcome everybody. And so we'll start with Janine, and then Marcela Vasquez, our director, will say a few words.
Thank you so much, Colin. So welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. I want to welcome everyone on behalf of the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences. It's such an honor to be with you today to celebrate the Center for Latin American Studies, which, as we know, is at its 50-year history of exemplifying the best of the University of Arizona and the core principles of the college, a just world together, where we work to support interdisciplinary research, outreach, and solutions to issues in society with communities that we partner with, whom we partner with. I think we'd all agree that CLAS and its community of scholars and others in the community have a strong dedication to impactful and relevant research that has supported so many of us in that work. The center has been a welcoming space for a vibrant community since its inception, something we all continue to cherish, and the center fosters that to this day. And I don't know about you all, but I tell new faculty or anyone coming to campus that they need to go to this center. It doesn't seem like anything on campus. It's the best place to be. So we're really grateful for it. I personally find this center to be one of the brightest spots on campus in my own work and suggest, as I said, that to all faculty coming to get on the listserv and become part of the community. The center also is a campus-wide resource and interdisciplinary hub, as you all know. CLAS was founded as an interdisciplinary hub for intellectual activity, and it serves that purpose more than ever, as we know today. With 160 affiliated faculty across the campus. I remember I didn't know that until we had to sign up for something, and I couldn't believe it was pages and pages of faculty. That's such an open, welcoming, it's such an open, welcoming group. And I'm very fortunate to be one of those faculty. The center has had a strong commitment to the land grant principles and community outreach, that, as we all know. One thing that really distinguishes CLAS from other departments and in other centers is that its long outreach history at our campus, in the city of Tucson, the state of Arizona, and to communities throughout the region and world. It is the last decade, in the last decade, I had to double fact check this actually. In the last decade, CLAS has organized over 100 events a year. That's thousands of free community speakers, films, art exhibitions, workshops, and conferences sponsored over the decades. It's just astounding. The CLAS community has always maintained a strong commitment to social activism, as we know, and the community where whether it be in South Tucson, South Nogales, or South America. The center's graduates, 450 MA alums since 1974, and more than 2,000 BA alumni, making the difference in the lives of so many. So as you are about to learn from today's wonderful panelists, CLAS's alumni have gone on to do many really fascinating and impactful activities and things for countless people around the world. We thank you all, of course, for being here to celebrate this 50 years of incredible work through the center. And I, of course, also, and the dean wants to thank the center's incredible leaders and the team for all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction. So just a little, welcome. Buenas tardes a todos, a todas, and welcome to our celebration of our 50th anniversary. I don't know what to do with all these papers and stuff. Sorry. I have part of it on my phone and the other part is on a piece of paper. Anyway, no, it's great to see faces of alum that I haven't seen in a long time. Some I didn't recognize. So it's been a long time. So thank you everybody for coming. We're super excited about celebrating today. We've done a lot of work, and as we worked on these celebration, we also did a lot of thinking about our place here at the university. And what Janine said is very true. Since we started in 1974 as an independent unit, we've done quite a bit to promote Latin America, to support students, to support faculty, to celebrate Latin America and learn from Latin America. So I hope we continue to do that. I think we have always been a very welcoming space for everyone, for students, for faculty, and for the community of Tucson and Arizona and everywhere else. We also have a common theme of solidarity, I think, that has been part of who we are. So issues of social justice, trying to be on the right side of history is what we have attempted to do through all these 50 years. And I think that has been a continuum regardless of who has been in the leadership. So we started 50 years ago. We started as an offshoot of the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, Spanish then only. And we were at a house across Speedway. I don't know if I'm sure some of you remember that. After that, at least we've moved like half a dozen times. We started in Douglas, in the Douglas building, then we moved to Marshall, where we are right now. Then we moved to Harville, then we moved back to Marshall. So that has been a challenge, but we're now in a place that we love and we hope we're gonna stay there for a long time. So you can look at our website for more detailed history of the center. I'm not gonna go through it. And also we're gonna show you a short video about the center in a little bit. But I think one of the things that has been important to us is the ability to have funding from the federal government, which is now very much at risk. But that has allowed us to do quite a bit. So for example, with Title VI grants, which we've had 5 of them since 2000, we've had about 5 million in funds that has been distributed to help faculty, students, staff, do research, go to Latin America and talk about Latin America. We've had about from 2000 to 2025, we had about $5 million in funding for CLAS, for language, which has actually been distributed over about 450 students. Title VI also allowed us to hire about 8 tenure track faculty who are not only in the center, but also in different places at the university. Also, we've had private funding from the Tinker Foundation, which since 1982 has given us about $1 million to distribute in grants for graduate students who want to do fieldwork in Latin America. So we have impacted about 600 students. Okay, Janine talked about the impact in terms of events, so I'm not gonna repeat that. But I do, before we start, I do wanna thank everyone who made the celebration possible, especially the staff, Colin Dietz, Cristal Natera, who's been doing a lot, our student workers, and also some of our faculty, Katie and Tonze. Thank you for all your help. And I also want to thank, over the years, there's so many people to thank for their dedication. I'm not going to do that because it's too many. But, we've had so many colleagues on campus, staff, a lot of our alumni work on campus. So that's great to see them once in a while. But I'm especially grateful, we are especially grateful to our leadership from past years. So I want to mention those who really have led the center through the years. First, Michael Myers, who started the center, Susan Deeds, Raul Saba, who's here. He was our associate director for a long time. Diana Liverman, who was very sad she couldn't be here, but she had something very important with her family, so she couldn't come. Bill Beasley was also one of our interim directors. Scott Whiteford, who's also here. Thank you, Scott. Where are you? There you are. We also want to thank Linda Green, who was also our director for 5 years. And of course, our assistant director, Colin Deeds, who has done all sorts of things for many, many years before a lot of us. So thank you, Colin. And me, of course, who's director right now. So thank you all. Also for working with us on organizing the event. Now our direct funding director, Michael Myers, is no longer with us. But, we, of course, always have him in mind. I don't think I ever met him, but Raul did. Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, so before we start, and I think the impact of the center is probably more qualitative. So hopefully these panels are going to show you or show us a little bit of a taste of what has happened with our students as they graduate and go on to better things. But I also want to thank, we have a short documentary made by previous directors and current. And I want to thank Luis Carrion and his team at UCAT, Gary Darnell and Michael Jones, for producing the documentary. Thank you. And also thanks to all the panelists that are here.
All right, that was great. Thank you, Luis, and your team so much for the UCAP from the UCAP program. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Colin Deeds, and I was literally born into the Center for Latin American Studies. And I'm not making that up. My mother worked for the center in 1981, the year I was born, right? So I left for a while, for 20 something years, but as an adult, I returned to the center over 20 years ago, first as a graduate student, and then, I haven't left ever since. So I'm really proud of the center. I'm really excited to introduce the amazing set of alumni panelists that you're going to hear from today. We put out just an open call for volunteers, for participants, and we were thrilled by the response. Over 30 of our alumni volunteered. Some of them couldn't all be here today in the end, but I think 25, 26 are here. And so we decided to organize these panels based on the impact that our alumni have had on, the local, the regional, and the international communities. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the panelists now, and we're going to start at the local level and then move on from there. So we've asked each of our panelists to keep their remarks to about 5 minutes or less. And we have a mix of people here in person and on Zoom. So we'll kind of try to rotate that a little bit so we can keep everything moving and engaged, right? So we're going to bring up our first local panelists here. If you're here in person, you're welcome to take a seat, or we can call you up individually. And let me just get the list. Sorry. You want to sit here at the table? Or either side, yeah. Yeah, we can spread out. Yeah. No, and so we've had, like we mentioned, 600 MA alums, thousands of undergraduate alumni over the years. They've gone on to amazing things all over the world, all over the country, and then especially locally here, right? I scoured the U of A web pages and my memory and other things to count 22 at least known alumni that work on campus today, right? So there's at least 22, mostly master's alumni, right? Including our own Javier Duran, Jeff Bannister, and many others. So some of the people here, including Katie O'Brien and Riley McIsaac, are here in university positions, and other people like Ian and Kelly are out there in the community as well. And then we have some people online that were really excited that could join us from the Phoenix area and other places, right? Perfect. So we're going to actually start with Lisa Schwartz on Zoom because she has another time commitment and a place to be. But I'm going to turn it over to Lisa, and Cristal will hopefully be able to get the technology to work. Juggling a lot here, but I see Lisa. We're ready to go.
Okay. Yeah, I can't see anybody, but that's okay. Um, so yeah, my name's Lisa Schwartz, and I ended up getting a PhD in education from U of A, and now I work at CU Boulder, doing engaged scholarship work with faculty, staff, and students. And so I was just going to say that I'm really grateful to the Latin American Studies program. It was my first introduction to higher ed. And I think it was a long time ago now. I can't even remember. It was like back in 2000 or 1999. Our cohort had a lot of folks like myself who had lived in Latin America, and it really helped us take our.
Lisa,
Mhm.
sorry, can you
Yeah.
start over?
Can I start over? Okay. Why could
I'm
no one
sorry, thank you.
could no one hear me or?
We can hear you now.
Okay, so I'm going to start over. So my name's Lisa Schwartz. I ended up getting, after my master's in Latin American Studies, later on I got my PhD in education with Luis Moll and Norma Gonzalez at University of Arizona. And now I'm at the University of Colorado Boulder. I first was here as a postdoc, and now I work in public and community engaged scholarship. So I have a lot of gratitude for the LAS program. Back now, like 25 years ago when I started, a lot of us had lived in Latin America and we had very interdisciplinary interests and hadn't been in higher ed yet. And I think the program really helped us deepen and expand the lived experiences that we had into academic experiences, and then back and sort of mediated that and allowed us to really engage back with the community again in deeper and better ways. So I had a Tinker grant. Kelly and I were there. We went to Cuba. I studied school gardens there. That was a very unique experience. We had incredible, really just such a breadth of coursework that really served me well. And I realized how lucky I was to be able to have a really broad social science coursework background where I could study folks like Foucault and Bordeaux, but also do a deep dive with Paulo Freire, thanks to Raul Saba, and also really get great background in what geographers were doing, some really exciting things and interdisciplinary things. And that's really thanks to Diana Liverman and some of the other faculty. I first got to have my mentor, Louise Moll, be my primary advisor for my Latin American Studies degree. And I was so thankful to the program for letting me define Latin America as really this borderland space, and not really having it just be that it had to be below our southern border. And just also remembering things like the Border Environment Conference, again, thanks to Diana Liverman and these other geographers that were so ahead of their times with CLAS, and even the Portuguese for Spanish speakers that I complained about. I'm so glad I had to do that. I've made lifelong friends that I still keep in touch with, and I think it just really prepared me for what I do today. So I'm very thankful. And I can't see anybody, so it's a little bit weird talking to myself here, but I'm glad everyone is able to come together to celebrate. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Lisa, for being here. Next up, we have Riley McIsaac, who's here on campus and in person live with us.
Uh-oh. You have to mute your. Oh, my account. Sorry. Yeah, somewhere that people online can see us that we should. Yeah, you stand here. Right here? Okay. Okay, great. It's from here. It's all. It's here. Hello, hello. Ooh. Ooh. But I have it is Marcela's, no? Testing, testing. Hello, hello, hello. That's better, right? Yeah, okay. It is always something with technology these days. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here today. This is just such a lovely event. It's been a bunch of us were just sitting around trying to figure out when exactly we finished our degrees. I think my master's I finished in 2009, and I wanted to just sort of start off by taking us back a little bit before my degree to give a little bit of context as to why I decided to do it. I was living in Boston and working in refugee resettlement in a legal department. And we had every weekend we had a clinic, an immigration clinic, and folks would come and, sort of present their cases. And I was helping the attorneys by translating and just hearing these horrific stories. And so I really got interested in immigration policy in the US. And after deciding that law school was not for me, I thought about, other ways that I could kind of continue to delve into immigration policy in the US and border issues. And I thought, well, if I'm going to study border issues, Boston, Massachusetts is not necessarily the place to do it. So, I applied to a number of different master's and Latin American studies programs and was just absolutely thrilled. I can remember the feeling, and this is what 2006. I think it was Dr. Wilder who called to tell me that I was being offered a TA-ship, and I was thrilled beyond belief. And so I drove cross country, moved out to Tucson, have really never looked back. My 2 years in my master's program here were just such a pivotal time for me. I did my thesis work actually in my home state of Maine, and did some work on recent Latin American migrants working in the blueberry industry on the coast of Maine. I'm not really sure I did actual research, but I, I had a lot of fun and wrote sort of an ethnography, I think, for my thesis. But after that, I spent about 9 years or so in various administrative roles on campus. And as soon as the university received its Hispanic Serving Institution status from the Department of Education in 2018, I absolutely knew that that is where I wanted to work, that I wanted to help shape our institution, our identity as an HSI, and help build out the capacity as an HSI. So I started kind of banging on the door of our current vice president for HSI initiatives, Dr. Marla Franco. And eventually, we found a position for me. So I currently serve as the inaugural director of grants development, HSI grants development here at the institution. And so my role really, I see it as residing at this intersection of research development as a discipline. So I'm highly involved in sort of national professional organizations and research development, and the sort of general catch-all diversity, equity, inclusion, and access spaces, which, if you are following the current politics in our country right now, is not exactly the best place to be working in both research and DEI-related initiatives. But I've really found, I think, renewed, like many of us, I'm sure, renewed vigor and passion for this work right now. As people are losing funding opportunities, I'm really finding my role in identifying the funding opportunities, matching them up with folks on campus doing incredibly important work is more important than ever. So I'm having to be a little creative, but there's still opportunities out there. I think there's more than people know. We'll see with the next funding cycle and in Congress and see what they do. But so I work in federal funding opportunities for Hispanic serving institutions. I work in minority serving institution opportunities, and then with funding opportunities that have explicit equity focuses. So if any of you are on campus and interested in exploring funding opportunities in these areas, or just having a conversation with me about ways that we might find funding for your super cool work, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And thank you so much. Thank you for letting me be part of this today.
Thank you so much, Riley. We really appreciate that. And I remember Riley fondly and her connection with the dance and the salsa and the Casino Rueda, right? And Katie as well. There's another long-standing tradition of our students and our alumni, right? Dancing. So I'm really excited to introduce. Yeah, if you want to switch it. So we've got our next alumni, Philip Rohde. Philip is joining us from Florence, or probably from Phoenix, where he lives, but he works for the Florence Project. Philip was an alum of our master's program as well as the law school program. So he has a JD, a dual JD and MA that he earned in 2021. And he also served as the president of our student association. And he also graciously agreed to serve on our academic program review. So, we owe Philip a huge debt of gratitude for all he's done. So thanks, Philip. All right, Philip, we're ready.
Well, thank you, Colin. That is incredibly generous of you. And it's so nice to see so many familiar faces. I wish I could be there in person, but thankfully I'm not too far away. So my name is Philip Brody. I'm a managing attorney at the Florence Immigrant and Refugee Rights Project. In case some of you may not be familiar with our organization, we're the largest nonprofit organization in Arizona that provides free legal and social services to people who are detained and in removal proceedings. So I started my graduate studies at the University of Arizona in 2017 as a dual degree student in Latin American Studies and Law. And at the time, I was only one of two students in this program. Maddie Sly was the other. I'm not sure if she's here with us today. Um, and although the prospect of adding an additional year to the 3 years of law school, I think scares a lot of law students away, the prospect of adding sort of an interdisciplinary approach to learning about immigration was really important to me, and I definitely found that in Latin American studies. And during my time at the U of A, I used to refer to how I spent my time in each program as north of Speedway, which was the law school, and south of Speedway, which was LAS. And as you can probably assume, I chose to spend most of my time south of Speedway. I found a tremendous sense of community in the center and the people who are a part of it. Sorry, give me a second. My screen just froze. Can you still hear me? My screen went black. Okay, good. Sorry about that. Thanks, Krista. And being a part of the LAS program really afforded me opportunities that I wouldn't have had as just a law student. And one of my fondest and most favorite experiences was taking a journalism class about reporting in the borderlands. And we went down to Nogales every week. And these on-the-ground experiences really motivated me to continue my legal education, particularly when I felt discouraged in law school. And for that, I'm really grateful. And meeting students in different programs not only expanded my perspective about issues relating to immigration, but also made me feel more connected to the university as a whole and the borderlands, which was really important to me. After I graduated from both programs in spring of 2021, I took the bar and began working at the Florence Project later that year. I started as a law graduate, then became a staff attorney, and as of last December, I'm now a managing attorney, which is still crazy for me to say because it's something I always dreamed of, but really never thought I would be able to accomplish. And the team that I help manage is called the Detention Action and Response Team, DART team. And we provide legal orientation and assistance to individuals in Eloy and Florence who are detained and are representing themselves in front of an immigration judge. I'm really passionate about this line of work, and I think my time in Latin American studies really encouraged me to pursue that. And I think that just regional studies, but specifically Latin American studies, not only promote different perspectives, but also just compassion in general and an understanding of fundamental human rights. And that's something really major that I took from my time in LAS. Finally, my time as a TA was one of my favorite things about being a master's student. And it really helped develop my interest in teaching, which gave me some really important transferable skills that I think were really valued by my employer when I was selected for this managerial role. So I could go on and on about my time at LAS and how important being a part of this program was to me. but I think I'll end it there. Anytime I come across someone who mentions the dual degree program, I praise it highly. I just cannot recommend it enough for law students, but also those who are in different programs and want a Latin American studies perspective. So it's good to see you all. I'll stick around for the other panelists, but thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Philip. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us. So we're going to switch back to live in person and with an alumni who I've known for many years, and I'm so glad is with us back here on campus as an undergraduate research initiative here at the U of A. Kelly Miriam Castro has been an amazing alum who's accomplished many things and done a lot of work networking around campus and connecting, Latin American studies with the SLAT program when she was there, and making a lot of other, meaningful connections over the years. So thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Colin. Thanks for everyone. It's so fun to see familiar faces from the years. Gosh, I think the phrase that describes me and my experience is not all who wander are lost, but I guarantee you I felt pretty lost when I applied to the Latin America Area Center in the fall of 1999. And I was a recovering molecular biologist. I have a bachelor's degree in biology, but I also had a Bachelor of Arts in Spanish, which I just got on the side because I loved it so much. And I had the opportunity as an undergrad to study in Guadalajara, Mexico. And then I went on, I graduated with my degree in biology. I did all these responsible things. If you look at my publications list, my very first one is a co-authored publication about energy transduction in the outer membrane of Escherichia coli. Fascinating reading. I recommend you check it out. Just kidding. But on the side, while I was working as a full-time microbiologist, I was also working as a Spanish language teacher for students trying to get their GED. And I lived in Washington State, which is an agricultural state. And as the years went on and I applied to graduate school, I actually got into 2 PhD programs in medical biosciences. My future was set, and I had a complete crisis one night. I was like, these are not the questions. I'm good at this, but it's not really what drives me. What am I gonna do? So I got up late at night, early years of the internet. There was one Latin American Studies program still accepting applications. Gosh, I think it might have been March or April. I called Veronica Peralta the next morning, like Monday morning, and I think they were accepting applications until like the next day at midnight or something. Tossed in my application, and the thing that I loved about it was its interdisciplinary nature and the fact that it was a 2-year program, because indeed, I was wandering and a little bit lost, and I needed that time to transition. And I do think Raul Saba actually told me once that they admitted me because I was a biologist and they were so curious. Hopefully I had other qualifications, but that was definitely one of the factors that they thought was curious about me. However, it's been such an amazing journey. I did not get a teaching assistantship, which I was a little disappointed about, but I did get a research position, and I was working with Diana Liverman, and I actually helped pull the data for that first Title VI grant. And I had no idea what a gem of an experience I was getting. Kind of like Lisa mentioned, it felt like a lot of hard work and a lot of tedious stuff, but just diving right in, my first experience in higher ed was dealing with a major Department of Education grant. And not the writing part of it, but just being part of that process. I also was in charge of levels, so all of you who are still on that listserv, it's still here. That was me for a little while. Lots of people knew my name across campus. That was fun. I did the newsletter working with Raul Sava, and so just lots of great experiences that helped me on my journey. So what did I do after I graduated? I graduated in August 2001, and then some planes hit some towers and the economy crashed and I had a hard time finding a job. So my first job outside of Latin American studies was kind of a desperation job. I had applied to 80 different positions, and I got a job as a criminal intelligence specialist, which was not where I wanted to be. My heart was in education, my heart was in the community. But I also needed an income. So I did that for about 10 months. And let me tell you, it was fascinating because I literally worked in an office where they put like cameras in Coke cans and like converted cars into undercover vehicles, like fascinating work. But the second that a teaching opportunity opened up at Pima Community College, I said goodbye. I was there for 10 months and I came back into teaching. I have discovered a love of teaching. I have done lots of work on border health studies. Katie and I actually worked on one together. I've done research in so many different areas. I worked for a mathematics education program for Latino and Latina families in Tucson Unified and Sunnyside School District. And I feel like Latin American studies has opened every door I wanted to walk in because I learned to communicate. I learned to do research, work with data, analyze things. Oh my gosh, Diana Liverman, thank you for that experience. And so again, I was wandering, wasn't sure what I wanted to do, continued working at the University of Arizona in student programming. I worked with Mexican American studies for a while, developed a research and leadership program there, and fell in love with developing support structures that help bring students to success. So fast forward a few years, I discovered having a PhD was helpful for the things I wanted to do. So I do have a PhD in history, working with Bill Beasley in Mexican history, modern Mexican history, with a minor in musicology, not at all related to molecular biology. I do wander. But now I actually work in undergraduate research. And it's a fantastic and fascinating, and it's like the thing that finally brought all my threads together, because I'm working with students in the STEM fields, I'm working with students in the arts, I am working all across campus, and I have this breadth of experience that if a program like Latin American Studies hadn't existed, that had brought this child into their fold that just couldn't decide what it was that she was interested in because she was interested in so many things, I'm not sure that I could have wound up in the space that I'm in now with the skills that I have now, able to interact with students that I can help. Undergraduate research is indeed a high impact practice, if I can use the coin word of the day, but it really makes a difference in student success. We see, measurable results, especially with students from more vulnerable groups and underserved communities. So it has just allowed me to use all of the things that I love, all of the things that I'm interested in, and bring them all together. So when I do look at the news, and it is a bit scary, thinking about where the funding comes for the work that I do and the things that I'm really passionate about. But then I look at the work the students are doing. April is Undergraduate Research Month, and I'm going around, I'm seeing all of the panels, I'm seeing the work the students are doing, I'm hearing about their passions, their journeys. I see that they are wandering, maybe they're lost, maybe they're not, but it really gives me hope for the future. So I'm so grateful that I was able to be in Latin American Studies and that it's given me the skills to then help other students on their journeys. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I really appreciate it. And I'm really excited to introduce our next panelist, an alum and a current, colleague and faculty member at the center that I really admire very much and enjoy working with. She's just an incredible, source of guidance and information, and she helps me every day in my job. So I can't express that. Yeah, and she's a really good dancer. So, oh, Oh yeah, and this is probably the most important thing. She is an ultimate Frisbee world champion multiple times over. So, of course, I'm speaking of none other than Katie O'Brien. So, Katie, thank you.
Thanks, Colin. All right, so I received my MA in Latin American Studies in December of 2003. Fast forward 22 years. I'm currently assistant professor of practice in Latin American Studies at the University of Arizona. I teach courses on gender, feminism, religion, development, drugs, food, and race and racism, all the things. It's funny because teaching Latin American Studies in the same department and same university where I received my MA seems like the most inevitable and the most literal application of an MA that one could possibly imagine. In reality, not much about my path between then and now has been direct or inevitable. And so I'm going to begin by talking a little bit about this circuitous path. After earning my MA degree, I wasn't sure about pursuing a PhD right away, so I taught middle school Spanish for 2 years, an experience that made me realize I definitely wanted to pursue a PhD. In 2006, I moved to Champaign, Illinois to study anthropology at the University of Illinois, a place that I was drawn to in part because, just like the University of Arizona, it also had a very strong Latin American Studies center, and they offered me a FLAS fellowship to study Quechua. And I quickly found that the advanced graduate classes that I took during my MA program, especially in anthropology and history, here at the University of Arizona, prepared me very, very well for my doctoral studies. So getting my PhD took 10 years. We won't get into that. But by the time I finally graduated in 2016, I was already living back in Tucson, and I decided a job opened up in the Center for Latin American Studies, and I said, okay, I'm going to apply for that. It was to be a program coordinator in the Center for Latin American Studies here. Incidentally, I did not get the job, but that's okay. The chair of the hiring committee at the time, Dr. Marcela Vasquez Leon, offered me an entirely different job to which I had not applied for, but it was to be project coordinator of SUSI, or Study of the United States Institute. For those who may not know, SUSI is a short-term study abroad program for Indigenous and Black Latin American university students who come to the University of Arizona to take classes. And working with SUSI over the past 8 years has been incredibly rewarding. First of all, because the participants themselves say it changes their lives, and we see that come to fruition in person when they're in the program. And then also my involvement with SUSI has led to opportunities in Latin America, such as giving online guest lectures on feminism in Bolivia, Ecuador, and Colombia, attending a SUSI alumni conference in Guatemala, and presenting at last year's LASA conference in Colombia. So in 2016, along with SUSI, I also started teaching in the Center for Latin American Studies. I first started as an adjunct lecturer. So the story of my teaching journey over the past 8 years has been one marked by the contingent nature of my positions and has required a lot of persistence and patience. So I didn't secure a full-time career track position until 2022. So looking back, I will say that the seeds of who I am today, what I do and why I do it, and with whom, were first planted during the MA program. And herein lies, I think, the significance of the program for me and my life. So I'm going to give you some examples of what I mean. I'll first talk about teaching, then research, and then end with a little bit about my personal life. So. In terms of teaching, during my MA program, I had the opportunity to be a teaching assistant, and I taught, I TA'd for the course Modern Latin America, and this is the same course I teach every year, almost every semester now. The course now has a fancier title. We needed to get more enrollment, so we titled it now Race, Rights, and Revolutions. In 2017, I redesigned it as the department's first fully online 7.5-week asynchronous class. And in 2021, I redesigned the same course as the first new Gen Ed course in the department. So just even looking at this course and how it's changed over the years, you know, despite all the changes in modality and curriculum, really the core reasons that I loved teaching Latin American studies in 2002 are the same as they are today. I firmly believe in the importance and significance of having undergraduate students study Latin America as a region. I feel that it can be a very transformative experience for students, and that same passion that I felt as a teaching assistant in 2002, I feel today. In terms of research, during my MA program, I did a thesis research project on Indigenous evangelicals in Chimborazo, Ecuador, looking at shifting generational narratives in the region after a mass conversion process in the 60s and 70s. So what that project, which was funded by not the Tinker at the time, Hewlett, but anyway, similar, which was funded by Tinker, Hewlett, whatever. That became my doctoral dissertation research. So I carried out the same research that I started in my MA program in my PhD studies. And then I bring this research directly into my teaching at the university. I created a course on gender and religion called Sex and Salvation in Latin America. So it's been a real treat to teach that class as well. Last but not least, I will say my personal life, getting my MA degree at the University of Arizona also had a lot of social benefits. Some people have referenced salsa dancing. There's lots of social events and parties. And I met the person who is now my husband through friends that are here. I won't tell you who, they know who they are. But I met them through friends in the Latin American Studies program. So we now have 2 children, ages 13 and 11. So it's kind of crazy. I was my 11-year-old asked me why I had to do this event for 50 years, anniversary of Latin American Studies. And I said, you know what? You wouldn't be alive if it weren't for the Center for Latin American Studies at the University of Arizona. He's like, okay, whatever. So in summary, the Master's in Latin American Studies has led me to where I am today, albeit in a little bit of a, interesting path, but it's had a profound effect on my life and career trajectory. And I just want to thank the organizers of this event, Dr. Marcela Vázquez León, Colin Dietz, Cristal Natera, Javier Duran, for giving us this opportunity to reflect on our interesting paths to where we are today. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you very much. And she's not the only story of Latin American studies students that met their future partners here. So there's a lot of those stories. I think we'll hear some more in a minute. This isn't one directly, but he's related to one of those stories with Oscar, right? But Ian Juan is here with us. Ian is actually a bachelor's of Latin American Studies alumni from back in 2015, and then he went on to earn a master's here at the University of Arizona. And so he's going to tell us what he's up to today. And thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, everyone. I actually got my bachelor's in 2006 and my master's in 2017. First, I want to say what an honor it is to be part of this celebration. 50 years of Latin American Studies at the University of Arizona is an incredible milestone. And I'm grateful to have the chance to reflect on what the program has meant to me, both personally and professionally. When I first entered the LAS program, I was drawn by an interest in culture, language, and history, but I had no idea how deeply it would shape the way I see the world and the path I would eventually take. What initially caught my eye about LAS was an interdisciplinary nature. I wasn't just studying Latin America, I was studying political systems, social movements, literature, migration, language, and the ways these intersect. It pushed me to see beyond borders, not just geographic ones, but also intellectual and cultural ones. One of the most important things I took from LAS is the value of storytelling, how narratives shape our understanding of people and places, and how amplifying the right stories can change systems. That's something I carry into my work every day, whether I'm facilitating public engagement, developing community-based policy, or working to make government processes more inclusive. The program also invited me to bring my own lived experiences into the classroom. For me, LAS wasn't about studying others, it was about connecting personally with histories and communities that reflected parts of my own story. That connection changed how I understood identity, belonging, and power, and it made me much more intentional in how I approach issues of equity, justice throughout my professional path. Those insights stayed with me as I moved into my career in urban planning and policy. Today, I work in space where planning too often overlooks the very voices that should be excluded. Today, I work in spaces where planning too often overlooks the very voices that should be at the center, those from diverse backgrounds and communities that have historically been excluded from decision-making. The LAS program gave me the tools to understand the barriers these communities face and the skills to listen, engage, and advocate effectively across cultural lines. After graduating from LAS program in 2006 with the bachelor's, I began my career in the nonprofit sector, working in Chicago's Pilsen and Little Village neighborhoods to support community-led initiatives and advocacy. I later returned to the University of Arizona to pursue a master's in urban planning and a graduate certificate in collaborative governance, further deepening my focus on inclusive decision-making. From there, I spent time in the private sector, supporting engineering and planning efforts across southern Arizona and Sonora, Mexico, gaining experience in both technical and community-facing roles. Today, I serve as a lead planner with the City of Tucson's Planning Development Service Department, where I support community development initiatives and help guide code amendments that shape how our city grows. Every step of this path has been influenced by my foundation I gained through the LAS program. It equipped me with the cultural awareness, analytical tools, and values I needed to build a career grounded in equity, collaboration, and meaningful community engagement. As we celebrate this 50th anniversary, I'm reminded that programs like LAS aren't just academic departments, but they're spaces for transformation. They give students a lens to see the world differently and the courage to imagine what's possible. I'm proud to be part of that legacy, and I'm excited to see how the next generation of LAS students will carry this work forward in their own ways. Thank you to the faculty, the staff, alumni, and everyone who has helped build and sustain this program over the last 5 decades. And thank you for letting me be a part of this moment of reflection and celebration.
Thank you very much, Ian. We really appreciate that. It's great to hear what you're up to these days and the important work you're doing, impacting our local community here. So that's awesome. We have one more speaker for this panel, if we're able to get her logged on. What's that? Hi, Iracema.
Hi there.
Iracema Coronado, are you with us from up in Phoenix?
I am.
We'll try to get her on right now, but Iracema is a graduate of the University of Arizona Masters in Latin American Studies program, and then she went on to PhD in political science. So I'm not going to give the years, I don't want to date her, but she is one of, she's definitely one of our most distinguished alumni out there. We really appreciate all she's done. And she's currently up at Arizona State University, and she is the director of the School for Transborder Studies at the Arizona State. So we forgive her for being a Sun Devil, but we know she bleeds blue and red with her multiple degrees from Tucson. And I know for a fact that, her heart is in Southern Arizona because she's told me that. So thank you so much, Iracema.
Thank you. First of all, congratulations to the Center for Latin American Studies for all that you have done for so many of us for so many years. My time at the University of Arizona in this program was back in the 80s. So yes, I am dating myself, but it was a wonderful time, not just for me, but also for my daughter. Those of you who went to school with me, including Javier Duran, was actually a big source of support, and he was my babysitter many times for my child while I went to class or had things to do. So the program was very special to me. It helped me to grow. It helped me to develop a skill set. The people who were there at the time, Susan Deeds and Raul Saba, were absolutely instrumental in making sure that we succeeded and we had the resources we needed to advance forward with our plans. I think the one thing I can say about Latin American Studies was that it was a fun, enjoyable, happy degree. I wish I could say the same for my political science degree, save Ed Williams. It was, political science was a lot harder and a lot more difficult for me to get through than the Latin American Studies program, but I survived. I am very happy that this degree has served me well in my teaching, in my research, and in my service to community. I still work a lot on environmental issues, which I focused a lot of when I was doing my work there. And I still have many, many good friends, including Florencio Zaragoza, Javier, Brian Nelson was one of a great friend, a lot of people that were just really instrumental in my life. And so I'm eternally grateful. I'm truly sorry. I'm in my car and I had to pull over to make this happen. But I send all of you un abrazo, muchas saludes y felicitaciones. I'm still enjoying my work very much. The Transborder School at ASU allows me to really work in areas that I love dearly, the border region, border communities. I work a lot in Latin America still, and so it's just a lot of fun. And without this degree, I don't think I would be where I am today, so I'm eternally grateful. And I am sorry that I need to get going, but I send you the best. I wish I could join you this weekend, but the School of Transborder Studies is having its quinceañera on Monday, and we're in the middle of finishing up the final touches for the celebration. And so anyway, it's just wonderful to connect with you. Again, congratulations to everyone. Thanks for everyone for being a part of it, and I'm sure that you'll continue to be successful in the future. Muchas gracias.
All right. Thank you so much, Iracema. We appreciate your time and joining us for a few minutes today. So that wraps up our local alumni panel. So I'm going to invite the next group, our regional alumni panelists, to come on up, those that are with us in person. And we have 2 online and 4 or 5 here in person. So, and I want to remind people in the audience, if you're thirsty, please help yourself to coffee or water in the back. And yeah, but we're a little behind. We'll keep it moving. We'll get back on track here in just a minute. But our first speaker today for the Regional Impact Panel is none other than Jeremy Carter. Jeremy was a Coverdale Fellow, a returned Peace Corps volunteer in Guatemala, and he's another one of our, like Philip, right? One of our Lasso presidents, right? He was a student club president, did a lot of great things organizing the students and events on their behalf. So, you know, we lost Jeremy for a little while. He went to Texas, but we got him back in Tucson, and he's here to stay, I think, with his family. So we're so excited. Jeremy's, you know, contributed even beyond his time as a student and an alumni through various organizations in his community service, right? And done some exciting things with LAS, raising money for students when he was at the Chicanos por la Causa for a while. But he's going to talk to us today more about some of these lessons that he's learned of economic development in the borderlands. So Jeremy, thank you.
Thank you, Colin. I wasn't expecting that. I appreciate it. So I guess I'm the nerd because I did the slides. I guess maybe I present too much. So yes, I graduated 15 years ago. And it seems like yesterday in many ways. I have been for the last 15 years dedicated my career to increasing economic opportunity and building assets in Latino communities in the U.S. My organization I work with, NALCAB, the National Association for Latino Community Asset Builders, works in all 50 states, DC and Puerto Rico. Our members are 200 plus nonprofits serving and operating in Latino communities like I said, in every state. They're small business lenders, they're affordable housing developers, they're mortgage lenders. They're the ones that are there doing economic development, revitalizing communities that have been well underinvested for many years. The organization began actually on the border, which is what I'm going to focus on today instead of talking about the whole U.S., just focus on the border region. There was a group of Latino leaders in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California that came together because they saw there was a lack of access to capital, a lack of access to economic opportunity in their communities. They were out of the mainstream financing sectors and they wanted in. And so they came together and formed an organization that today is where I work and really my passion. So I got photos. Some of you may see yourself. Dr. Saba, you have a little less gray hair in that one there in the middle. One of the things I really appreciate about LAS in my time here was that, like Colin talked about with LASSO and the student organization, I really felt empowered and I felt I had the structure and the opportunity to take students into areas and thoughts that they maybe had not done previously. You know, I feel like having been living in Tucson for 30 years, that a lot of people come here to learn about the border, but they don't actually go and experience the border for all of its warts, right? Bien or mal, the border area. And so I wanted to try to change that as much as I could. In many ways, I felt like if there's a system that we want to change, one of the best ways to do that is to better understand how that system works. And so with some students, I organized what I've called border tours. We had the opportunity to go visit the Tucson station and the Nogales substation with the Border Patrol and do a ride along on the border. We went to an ICE facility in Florence and toured that facility. And on the flip side, we also went with Humane Borders in the desert. We cleaned up a migrant layup camp. We filled the water stations. And we went with the Keno Border Initiative, and we went to their relief station in Sonora, and we went to their temporary housing for families where we learned just devastating stories that people should really hear to get a more nuanced understanding of exactly what it means to be an immigrant in the U.S. And so I'm eternally grateful to Latin American Studies and to the staff and faculty for allowing that to happen, because I don't think that happens enough, and I don't know that that it would have happened if it were not here. And so you can see like some photos, like I said, of some past alumni and some people in public health too, because Peace Corps, we had to mix it up. You know, through that, I really felt empowered to understand border dynamics in a different way. And my studies, my classes really helped me do that with a solid foundation in economic theory and development theory, understanding how all of the lives in the border region interconnect, and down to the household level, how the experience of living in the border region really affects your ability to live day to day and affects your vision of what it means to be successful and what it means to stretch that dollar as thin as you can, because you aren't sure when when the next opportunity will come. And so here's a couple other photos in a class with Dr. Hantun. We went to Cafe Justo in Agua Prieta, and then, like I said, the migrant camp in Arabaca. All that together gave me what I really feel is a 360 perspective on how policy, politics, the economy, um, you know, and communities all interact with each other. The border region is really left out of anything mainstream, especially after 9/11 with the Patriot Act. A lot of big banks use that as an excuse to de-risk. That's the term they use, de-risk, and pull out of the border region. So there's very few places where a person that lives on the border can go and access things that we take for granted here in Tucson and bigger cities. It was also an opportunity for the government to start militarizing. It changed the way that people in Nogales and Douglas and over in Las Cruces and other border communities live day to day. You saw a lack of commerce. You saw people, tourists, no longer wanted to stop in the border. If they went at all, they were going fast down the Rocky Point, right? You had Fort Huachuca getting prohibited from going to Nogales. So that stopped those people from going down and spending money. And on the other side, you had Mexicanos that no longer, if they're waiting 3 hours in a line, they're not stopping in Nogales. They're going to Tucson and Phoenix to spend their time. And so you really saw a huge underinvestment, divestment in these border communities. And it left them out of a lot of opportunities that we take for granted. And so my organization, along with the nonprofits in those communities, have really tried to come together in a way that allows us to share best practices. So we frequently communicate with each other. We have in-person events and webinars where we talk about what works in communities. We share funding when possible. So my organization is a grant maker, and we also facilitate grants. So we frequently work on federal grants for border communities. You can see, I'll talk about these projects too briefly in just a second. The whole point is that we build a grassroots way for border communities to grow. That's not top down. That's not coming from what people tell them they should do. It's coming from what they see as their reality and what they feel they should do. And we support them in that, and it increases their collective voice. And I think it catalyzes real change. These are just a couple of examples of projects that I've had the pleasure and the honor to work with. These are both in Nogales. You can see on the top, that is the former Bowman Hotel. It was built in 1917. It was in really bad shape. The organization, Nogales Community Development, that I was lucky enough to intern with while I was a student here at the university in my master's program, received $12 million between different foundations, public funding from the federal government and from banks to develop the Bowman Senior Residence. So it's 48 one-bedroom apartments for seniors earning 60% area median income or below. They relocated the three businesses that are there on that bottom floor. And you can see it's not an eyesore anymore. It's on Grand Avenue. Next time you're down there, take a look. And on the other side, this is one that's really near and dear to my heart because it's one that I was very active in. Through Drachman Institute, this pad on Morley Avenue was built up out of the floodplain. It was a place where food carts and food trucks could park and cater to the businesses, to the people coming over in the border. Over the last 10 years, through federal grants, some of which I wrote, it turned into the Nogales Community Development Commercial Kitchen, where you can see it's an 1,800 square foot commercial kitchen for 34 low-income businesses to operate, where if you're a food truck, you need to have a licensed facility. It's often very expensive. It's often hard to find. And so this is a way for those food businesses to really subsidize their cost and they're able to now to really push that money into their families and build up their their household economies, which is the whole point. This happens across the border region, right? So I've worked on payday alternative loans in Brownsville, Texas. I've worked on affordable housing projects in El Paso and Las Cruces and in McAllen and in Nogales. I've worked on commercial corridor work in San Isidro and Nogales, right? And then I-10 lending, right? So if you're undocumented, or even if you're not, if you don't have a social security number, you can get an I-10 number, an individual taxpayer ID. It still allows you to access some federal, some mainstream funding, I should say. And we have members that are providing housing, mortgage housing to immigrants through their I-10 numbers and help. I'm really honored to be working on those too. So it couldn't be possible without LAS, I think, in many ways. And I'm really grateful again to be here. And thank you so much for having me.
All right, we're going to move back to online with one of our bachelor's alumni, David Troutman. David graduated back in 2007. He went on to Teach for America after that, and he is now currently a school principal, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about what he's been up to for the last, decade plus. All right, David, we'll hand it over to you.
Awesome. I have some images to share. I don't know if you can see my screen. If not, I'll just...
We see him.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm super happy to be here. I am also incredibly grateful to my experience in Latin American studies. I did have a bit of a midlife crisis. I quit my principal job, and now I'm a PhD candidate and consultant. So talk a little bit about that, and I'll talk about my experience at LAS. So oh no, my picture is not here. That is very sad. It is Indiana Jones. I came to undergrad really wanting to be an archaeologist and had this sort of vision of being like Indiana Jones. And I quickly came to realize, so I started in anthropology and Latin American studies, some problematic ways that my positionality was showing up in my own practice as a student. And so I ended up having the opportunity as a student in LAS, particularly coming from a relatively privileged background, to better understand my role in the way that I connected to communities. And I think about, my freshman year I think it was like Intro to LAS with Liz Oglesby. We went on, my section went on a trip to Colonia in Nogales and had the opportunity to just talk to folks who worked in factories, who were living in a community that I'd never really experienced other than in reading. And so there was this really visceral opportunity to understand the world outside my own. None of my pictures are working. Okay. Well, I also had the opportunity in LAS to study abroad. I started I placed out of one semester of Spanish when I took my placement test. And so I studied abroad in Viña del Mar in Chile through Latin American studies and had a really wonderful experience there. Again, I'm not sure what's going on with my images. And all I could find was a picture of the bar that we used to hang out at in the city. But I think, again, this is like a really critical component that's been important in my success later on, is that I left college basically fluent in Spanish. And that allowed me, when I did my master's, to do research in Spanish. I was a principal along the US-Mexico border here in California. And so the opportunity to partner and work with families was really fundamentally vital. And so I'm tremendously appreciative for that. I also had the opportunity as an LAS student to engage in some research. So I spent some time in Mexico and I wrote my capstone paper around conceptions of gender and identity in lucha libre. I also had the opportunity to, through LAS, go to Puerto Rico for a class where we did my first sort of exploration into education, where a colleague and I from CLAS were able to do looking at language policy in Puerto Rican schools around sort of English and Spanish. And so that was a really eye-opening opportunity for me to explore. Again, I had wanted to be Indiana Jones, and then I was like learning about social justice and learning about schools. And so this really profoundly shaped the direction I went in. I had a ton of research opportunities. This in Dr. Jadwiga Piper Mooney's class, I wrote a paper about representations of women in mid-century Chilean publications, and I got to present that with her and some other students at the Rocky Mountain Council for Latin American Studies back, I think it was in 2007. And then I finally did go on a dig in northern Guatemala with Takeshi Inamata and Daniela Triadon, and learned there that I did not, in fact, want to be an archaeologist. And I had the opportunity to really think about the ways in which I wanted to engage with communities. In this case, we worked with some Kekchi workers who had been pretty profoundly impacted by the Guatemalan Civil War and genocide. And so, again, these are all these really incredible opportunities for me to understand not just like what is happening in the world, but how I can relate to that in ways that are not extractive and not patriarchal, but really thinking about what it means to partner with communities. And so after I realized I was not going to be an archaeologist, I graduated and I started teaching. I then did a master's in Latin American studies at another institution where I studied alternative education in Chiapas, Mexico. And again, like the language skills I had picked up in LAS meant that not only was I able to conduct original research in my master's program, largely in Spanish, but I also got to study and become basically proficient in Portuguese. I then went back to teaching and I did a master's in ed leadership. I worked as an assistant principal in Chula Vista, California, which is close to the US-Mexico border. And then I was a principal in Imperial Beach, which is right along the US-Mexico border. So as the crow flies, my school was probably less than a mile from the border. And so we had a lot of students who traveled daily back and forth. And I think that my understanding of sort of trans-border lives really was influenced by the opportunities I had at U of A, in particular being in a community pretty close to the border. And I myself grew up in New York and Massachusetts. So this was a really, again, an opportunity to learn and understand more about the types of challenges that the families I was serving and working with were facing. Now I am a doctoral candidate where I research how school leaders and school leadership teams operationalize and conceptualize equity and how they are enabled or constrained by relational systems. I also am a practitioner faculty at the High Tech High Graduate School of Education, where I work with students in the Master's in Ed Leadership program. And I was actually just off a call with one of my students who's remote, who's in Colombia. And so I have a number of students in Colombia who I've been able to connect with, who are being sponsored by a Colombian nonprofit to participate in the program. And again, my understanding of their context, my ability to sort of speak to some of the similarities and differences with the educational context here is fundamentally related to my experiences in LAS. And then I also do consulting on the side as well around leadership and leadership development. And I think that what I learned in Latin American studies was the skills to step back humbly and really listen and learn other people's experiences. And that has helped me a lot in all of these roles. So some quick highlights. Latin American studies really was my first exposure, again, as somebody who was relatively privileged, to like understand social justice and develop a really strong commitment to it. And so understanding my positionality, working with communities of color, I don't know if I had been in another program that I would have come to these same understandings and been able to pivot and reflect in the way that I did as I went into teaching, had I not had this experience. I also have been really well served by the opportunities I had to like engage in hands-on research and travel and knowledge production, that all of the work I did to write and present through the opportunities in Latin American studies have supported me as I'm now working on my dissertation. And then, of course, the development of language and communication skills. Again, I started with almost no Spanish, and by the time I was done with the program, was fluent enough to be able to converse and conduct research and communicate with the families that I was working with, both as a teacher and later as an administrator. So I am, again, tremendously grateful for the opportunities I had, and particularly the folks that I worked with in Latin American studies. And that's what I've got.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great to hear what you're up to. All right, next we have here with us in person, Dolores Rivas Bati. I think Dolores has probably been to as many Latin American Studies events as anybody over the years. She's been a longtime supporter and collaborator of ours. I see her face in the audience, you know, when we're having Charlas con Café in the center. I see her out in town and different community events. And so it's just great that she's here to share a little about herself and her story and connections with LAS. So Dolores, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the honor of inviting me to be here. I'm really happy to see you here. I recognize you and admire you very much. So I started writing a couple of weeks ago, and it involved over preparing for a 5-minute talk. But I did start looking up that Tinker grant. I thought
I need to share the screen real quick.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
that's so long ago, and that's the only connection that I could sense, really, concrete connection with Latin American studies after I got my undergraduate degree. And then I realized what a hub of influence the Latin American Area Center was on this campus. So this is my area of study. I finally narrowed it down to what I call Gadsden, Arizona, which includes Arizona, New Mexico. But I also include Sonora in that. And trying to get it to that felt manageable, but it ended up getting larger and larger as I tried to write the history of Gadsden, Arizona. So I want to read a little bit. Thank you to past and present UA Center for Latin American Studies faculty, to my undergraduate professors, Reynolds Stone, Leo Barrow, Nivea Parsons, and Robert Quinn, and to Michael Meyer and Raul Saba, whose Tinker Award for Research on Late Century Immigration with my great-grandfather's Sonoran archives framed my master's report in the School of Journalism. Donna Guy brought me into interdisciplinary work in US and Latin American history, photography, and art with Keith McElroy, Stacy Whittefield, Catherine Morrissey, and Sarah Moore that prepared me for NEA and Smithsonian fellowships in Mexico City and Washington. Kevin Gosner secured my doctoral minor in art history, which at the time was unimaginable. Juan Garcia grounded readings of performance, pictography, epigraphy, lithography, and photography in Gadsden, Arizona. In the Spanish department, Eliud Chufe guided my efforts at teaching. Malcolm Compitello supported conference travel and research appointments at Brown. These are Latin American Center faculty and associate faculty, all affiliated with the center, that played such an important part in my education and my profession after I finished my work. So the rest of it really, the rest of my writing really is about how the titles of my work sort of tracked the trajectory of my thinking. So I hope you can follow them. This was with my interest. I was always interested in the connection between art and history, and art and thinking. So I chose photography primarily as an object and as a practice to do some of the writing. So my essay in the Encyclopedia of Latino Culture, edited by Chuck Tatum, structured a regional arc of photographic images and ideas about Arizona border projects at the Smithsonian and Chicano photography in the now, border crossers, time travel, cosmic imagery in Santa Fe. And then Corazón Concertinado, which was a sort of shift in focus, the poetics of politics and politics in art, was the one that sort of brought them together in meaningful ways to me, that were touched upon in prior ones, but became really consolidated in that. So this work thereafter sort of spotlit recurring spiritual icons in A Border Under Siege. So currently, I'm working on broadening the scope, and I'd like to say gracias to Javier Duran and the Confluence Center program to increase narrative content in UA special collections that funded my online memoir of sonnets and watercolors, and then renewed my awareness of the universality of site-specific portraiture that recently sparked an idea for a performative essay. And this is on your right here is on your right is a self-portrait by Raul Pizarro, who was a inaugural fellow in the Reclaiming the Border Narrative archive. And then on the left by Flemish master Anthony van Dyck, both iterations of the story of Icarus and Daedalus. So that got me thinking about all of the sort of references to classical mythology, by which I mean Western and Mesoamerican mythology in Latin America, for this essay called Signs of Greco-Roman and Mesoamerican Antiquity and Art of the U.S. Southwest. And these two pictures, one emerged online and the other one emerged at the Boston Museum of Fine Art at about the same time. The Van Dyck was one that hadn't been seen in public almost as long as it had been produced, which is about 400 years ago. And then this one was done in 2009. But both of them exalt the bravura of human flight that emerges in real time with the work of Cristina Cardenas, who is a UA graduate in the College of Art, who makes allegorical self-portraits of immigration in the homeland. So what I see in these pictures, and by speaking to the artists, is a sort of a search for the kinds of language that in this part of the world, in this region, expresses these sort of universal ideas of flight, and here that mean escape. Those of you who are familiar with the story, that mean escape, and that also bring the gods and mortals together. So with that, I'd like to thank and conclude this hymn of praise to the center with my deepest thanks to Santa Arias for supporting another turn in a new direction, and the Latin American Area Center for setting me on my way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dolores. We really appreciate those kind words and hearing about your experiences here. The next guest, I'm really pleased to present and welcome them. They win the contest for traveling the furthest to come be with us here live in person today, right? So they'll get a prize for that. We got Elena Jackson Albarran. She graduated in 2002 with her master's from the Center for Latin American Studies, and then she went on to earn a PhD in Latin American history here in 2008, and has gone on to do great things in Miami of Ohio.
Took away my punchline. Thanks for telling me when I graduated because I was trying to figure it out. I stayed an extra semester because I actually loved my experience so much and had no idea what to do next. So I begged and got an extra semester. So I did a 2.5-year master's. It's a little overwhelming in a really good way to be here today because of everything that's going on nationally, and then also specifically in our state of Ohio, where I am at Miami University. And yes, I do have to make that correction all the time to people, where I'm a professor of Latin American Studies and History. So I came here in fall of 1999, and I was trying to decide between Tulane and UT Austin and this program. It turned out that Katrina sent most of the Tulane students, my cohort actually blew west and landed with us here. So I would have ended up here anyways, it seems like, if I had gone to Tulane. One of a few signature experiences that I had during the master's program were, first of all, I think right off the bat, I did an internship at the Florence Immigration and Refugee Rights Project, not on the legal side, but more on the archival side. And they put me to creating a set of materials for children, unaccompanied children that were coming through, even in that early time of 2000 maybe. And that actually was really kind of out of my wheelhouse, but it exposed me to both archives and to the specific subjectivities, vulnerabilities, and agency of children, which then became the subject of everything that I've been doing since, which is childhood studies as it relates to constructs of the nation state, and notions of imperialism and mobility and transnationalism. Where does children and the ideas about childhood fit into all of that? So that's kind of been a little bit of my intellectual trajectory that started here at this center. I also benefited from getting Tinker Foundation money, and my first Tinker, I did 2 Tinker fellowships, and my first one I went to Guadalajara, Mexico, and I was working on an art therapy program with street children that I had sort of designed with, as per the instructions of the Tinker, no real supervision. I just kind of developed an art therapy program and went into Guadalajara and wandered the streets and found children and just did it. There's no IRB people listening, are there? But that did turn out to be traumatic and eye-opening in many ways, as working with street children is and working with vulnerable populations is. And I realized that I probably didn't want to continue to pursue art therapy, but that I did still want to do something related to children and childhood. That summer was also the same summer that the PRI lost their first election in forever. And being there in that historic moment was incredible. It's the same summer that Amores Perros was released, and I saw that in the movie, in the cinema in Mexico, and that was also transcendental. So I realize now that I teach Mexican history, among other things, that I was sort of living these historical moments that I now teach about. And so it's kind of interesting to have that long-term kind of perspective on that. A few other highlights of the program were definitely taking Portuguese for Spanish speakers, which, as Lisa mentioned at the beginning, she was in my cohort. We all dragged our feet. I'm not going to use Portuguese. I've used it so much more than I expected I ever would. I'm super grateful to all of you who pushed and forced me to take that class. I continue to try to keep up with Portuguese, and then I used it when we lived in Luxembourg for a year because it's the de facto language of most of the immigrant population in Luxembourg, and I didn't speak Spanish and French. I mean, French and German or Luxembourgish, but I could speak Portuguese, so I was able to get by. So that was an unexpected benefit. For me, another highlight of the Latin American Studies program here as a master's student was that it exposed me to the professionalization of interdisciplinary studies. And I attended my first academic conference when CLAS was hosted here in Tucson. And to my utter embarrassment to this day, I didn't know what an academic conference was. And I signed up to give a paper on some research that I was doing for my master's, and I made a poster, like a physical middle school science fair project poster that I brought in and held up while I talked about it. And anyway, I survived that horrific experience and went on to give other conferences at which I did not present like handmade posters on poster board with Sharpies. Um, I also got to teach at Border Links. So I actually got to teach a transnational class, the history of Mexico, that I got to teach part in Tucson and part across the border in Nogales. So just being able to walk across the border and teach about the region and geography and the history that we're in, it was really meaningful and powerful. And it has been an interesting challenge to translate those experiences that were so rich and that I took for granted being here in Tucson for so long, to the Midwest, and a particular part of the Midwest where those histories are a lot less visible. They are there and you have to dig a little bit harder, but you can't go out and touch the ground where the border changed at some point. So you have to find it in other ways. And I've enjoyed having that challenge. I can't easily take my students to lunch in Mexico, which I did do when I was teaching here. But we find other ways to substitute that. It has been mentioned here before, the salsa community, the Casina de Rueda and Rueda Casino and the salsa community. And that was something that I did also participate in. And that has helped also to make Tucson and the Latin American Studies Center familia, literally, for me. And there are these Cubans that come to Tucson and create family networks here. And I think you'll hear more about that. We'll keep teasing. But Tucson really is family in literal and figurative sense. And being here today, really feel like I'm able to absorb something that has sustained me for 16 years teaching at Miami University. And it's nice to come back and kind of re-energize, go back and fight that fight at the state level that we have ahead of us over there. So it's great to see all of you, and I can't wait for the pachanga. We'll do some dancing.
Thank you, Elena. And I'm sure your poster was better than somebody reading a paper. Yeah, the historians are famous for just reading papers, so I'm sure some people appreciated the poster very much, right? So, all right, we're going to move on to our next distinguished alumni panelist that is joining us via Zoom. This was one of our undergraduates from back in 2012. Francisco Lara Garcia was actually named the Outstanding Student of the Year that year when his graduating class. So he did a lot of great things while he was here in Tucson, and then he went on to eventually earning a PhD at Columbia in sociology in 2022, a few years ago, and sort of following in the line of his own father, who's an academic and a very well-known scholar himself, Francisco Lara. So Francisco Lara Garcia, I think you're on, and we will hand it over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thank you for the invitation. And first and foremost, what I want to say is congratulations to the center. I'm so pleased that you all are having this event, and my regrets that I cannot be there, but it's still the middle of the semester. Colin, it's great to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time, so it's great to see you there. I also, it sounds like Raul Sava is there as well. And so, I want to send my hello to Raul Sava, to Dr. Sava, who was a formative professor for me while I was there at the University of Arizona. Colin dated me a little bit. Yes, I got my BA in Latin American Studies and in Sociology in 2012. After I never intended to end up on the East Coast, but that's just the way things happened. I did Teach for America for for 2 years after I finished college. Elena just reminded me that I also enjoyed my time at the U of A and at the center so much that I decided to stay an extra year. So it took me a long time to get out of Tucson because I was just having so much fun. Then after that, I got an MA at Harvard in urban planning. I got a PhD in sociology at Columbia. And I just finished up a postdoc at Princeton before I started my new position here in New York. And, I've been kind of reflecting, over the last week about my trajectory and the place that the Center for Latin American Studies had in my trajectory. And, a few things. One, I think it really was the trampoline that set me on to my current trajectory. I learned a ton. I started to get the rumblings of what it meant to be a rigorous scholar, and I think I have the center to really thank me for giving my foundation for what it means to be a scholar. And thinking back, I think the thing that really sets the center apart from me is that it really became the home base and the intellectual home for me while I was a student. And sometimes the thing about home is that you don't really know how good you have it until you leave. And that is how I continue to feel about the U of A and the Center for Latin American Studies. Like I said, I've been at a bunch of institutions, and I don't think a single one has felt like home the way that my time at the Center for Latin American Studies felt. So, that has to do a lot with the people that were there and the experiences. But I also think that there are things about the center that make it special. First off, right, I didn't know this at the time. It wasn't something that I thought about, but the fact that the U of A is an Hispanic serving institution for someone that is Mexican was something that was really special for me. And now that I've been at all these places that are definitely not Hispanic serving institutions, I've learned to appreciate what that can do for the confidence of a young person. I also think, lots of people have alluded to this, but the center, you just have massive amounts of flexibility to explore, to do different sorts of things, to go across the border, to go to Latin America, to be interdisciplinary in the ways that make sense for you as a burgeoning college student. And, like to quote Ms. Frizzle a little bit here, the Latin American Studies allowed me to take chances, to make mistakes, and get messy in the sorts of ways that I think allow me to be adventurous in my own scholarship today. And that's something that I carry with me, and I'm really grateful for. But I think the most important thing is that I'm often shocked at how much of the core knowledge that I use in my scholarship and in my own work, I developed while I was an undergrad and taking classes at the Center for Latin American Studies. And, of course, I've built on that knowledge. I've learned all sorts of different things in the places that I've been in. But that core knowledge is really what centers me, and is also, I think what I learned at CLAS was an approach and a sensitivity to the challenges of people in Latin America, which give you insight on the challenges of not only people in Latin America, but broadly. And that's a thing that I think I learned there and has only served me well, as I've gone on to do new things. So, I just started, this is my first year as an assistant professor of sociology at Hofstra University. This is a university here in Long Island in New York. And I'm also extremely pleased that I'm an affiliate with the program of Latin American Studies. And so I've been thinking a lot about CLAS because now I'm the person that is teaching some of these undergraduate Latin American Studies classes. And so I'm constantly trying to think and remind myself and look back to see what the mentors that I had at CLAS did for me, that I want to carry into my own practice as an educator and as a research. So I think I'll conclude by saying that again, congratulations to the Center for Latin American Studies. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm so sorry that I'm going to be missing the pachanga later. Sounds like a lot of fun.
Thank you, Francisco. It's great to see you online and hear what you're up to. Appreciate it. All right, it's my pleasure to introduce a good friend and a good colleague of mine. And he graduated in the cohort with me, so we got to know each other really well over the years. We got to establish one of the what I consider the founding poker group of Latin American studies, right? So we were all these broke MA students that would get together once a week and play poker and commiserate over our classes and what we weren't working on for homework. But yeah. And so Juan Carlos Albarran, he also joins us from Ohio.
Thank you. Thank you to the center. My connection is very personal. I'm originally from Havana, Cuba, and I moved to Tucson, Arizona, thanks to my family. My stepdad was an affiliate to the Center for Latin American Studies, Tom Miller. She was a local writer here, and that was my initiation, and that's how I connected to the center. I heard about it. But I was interested in other things. So I went to Northern Arizona University and I did an undergrad in hotel and restaurant management. I wanted to be a businessman. That's what I wanted to do. That's what I came to the United States, profit. But like a great undergrad students, I needed some job. And where did I find a job? There's this great place known as El Parador. It used to be a great Mexican restaurant. And while I was doing my undergrad, I was also working there, and there was a great band that would play salsa on the weekends, and I was a waiter and a bartender. And my connection, even though it's personal, I also would like to say that is music. That's what brought me to the Center for Latin American Studies here. Because at that place in Broadway that doesn't exist anymore, it's no longer there, not even the building. The spring trainer, baseball players will go and dance. TA from the Spanish and Portuguese department would go and dance. And I got to know a lot of people there while I was a waiter, while I was finishing my undergrad in NAU. And I was like, I like this. I like this collective energy that comes here. And my stepdad would tell me about that, and I found it like, oh, things are changing. I also have a couple of other personal experiences that start shifting my view of Latinos in the United States. The center was no longer Cuba. I didn't live in Miami. My experiences here were with people from Central America, from Mexico, undocumented, documented. So all these issues started becoming reality for me. And I started to shift into what are the issues that the local population in Tucson has. And through that experience, I met a wonderful person that today is my partner. And she was in the Center for Latin American Studies. She was doing a master's. And then through that, I started meeting people like Berkman or professors that I met Saba. I met Beasley. So I started to see that there was an intellectual community that was really rich and that could provide me with something that could guide me and to fit what I wanted. But I also was very selfish. I didn't know that I didn't fit into one specific area. So the Center for Latin American Studies was great for me because it could accommodate some of my interests, my desires to know things that I could still fulfill in that area. So I finished my undergrad. I was considering going into other areas, but I already had committed to a relationship, and I explore opportunities. I volunteer in some areas, and I decided to apply to the Center for Latin American Studies. I was accepted there, but I still didn't know which direction to go. I think I took Margaret Wilder intro class and I learned about sustainable development and I was fascinated. But also, I think my year, 2005 to 2007, was the first year of Scott Weifer. And I learned about, you can do a project about water, you can do, so I was so overwhelmed by the curiosity that I had about things and projects and meeting faculty and people that are interested in things that I was contraries. And then I took a class with Janice Sturman about ethnomusicology, and that was my call. So I decided that I wanted to go into a world of Latin America that emphasizes things that are important to me, and music was important to me. So it was at the moment after I took that class with Janice Sturman that I said, this is the place. But Center for Latin American Studies is fascinating because I was able to win a tinker to take me to the place I was born to study about tourism. So I won the tinker and I went to Cuba. I met with Beasley and I discussed the opportunity to do a semester abroad to study in the Tec de Monterrey in Mexico City. So as a grad student, I was able to do a semester in Mexico City studying danzón and taking classes in there. So music was the opportunity for me to get into areas that I was very curious. And then from there, I started to become politically conscious about the realities that we were living in this area of the United States. So I started to volunteer and do things that became important to me. I became a US citizen at that time. I think we celebrated, we did a party and invited a lot of my cohort. And when I finished, I decided to shift my world. So no longer wanted to work in hotel and restaurants. And I decided to work with the refugee resettlement settlement. So I decided to work with the Lutheran Social Services here. And that was a time where we were one of the first states were relocating or resettling people from Iraq. So the Iraq war. So we start working and I started learning about other global conflicts and resettling and policies, state, federal. And that level of understanding of local politics, of the world, of immigration, really solidified that I needed to do something more important, not only for me, but for the other, for those who community that decided to come to the United States. At the same time, an opportunity opened for my wife and I at that time to move to Ohio. Never heard of Ohio, didn't know what it was. It was cold, it was different. It was a challenge. For me, it's still a challenge. In January and February, it's miserable. But I've been teaching there for the last 17 years. I started as a VAP, an adjunct. Then I became a senior lecturer. And I have taught many courses for undergrad. My first classes were with the notes I got from Bergman, from Wilder, from Conteri. So that's how I started founding my classes, from my intro to sustainability to all the many classes that I have taught over the years. But one aspect that I started to emphasize was the need to support the student, because it's not a larger community as we have here, but there's people in need everywhere. We have DACA students, we have students who come from divorce background, in need help. And I felt that as an educator, I should also be a mentor and provide for those students that come and knock at the door. So I was hired at the Latin American Studies program, and it was an opportunity for us to extend what we were taught here. So we developed programs. I have taken students abroad to Brazil, to Costa Rica, to Cuba. That was an important and personal to me. And that has been one of the major goals I have done since I've been there, besides teaching, mentoring, providing scholarships, expanding the opportunity for a student to continue finding degrees and majors and minors in Latin American studies. I find that is a very important opportunity for students. But in the last 6 years, I've done something that was very unique, and that's what I think, that building friendships, building networks is important. The last 6 years, I've been working with Marcela and Colin in the program that, and my cuñada, we've been working with the Study of United States Institute for Student Leaders, and I've been the director of that program at Miami University of Ohio. It's a program about social entrepreneurship, where we bring students from Latin America to have the opportunity to learn about community issues, to learn about other aspects of the United States. So we work with areas in Chicago, the Pilsner, the areas that minorities, undocumented, gentrification, and some of the major problems that are being present in those communities in Cincinnati. And I'm very happy to have found that opportunity to do that. And that seed was planted in the Center for Latin American Studies. So I'm very proud to be part of that. And that now, every time I write a letter of recommendation for a student who wants to come and study law school here, or they want to do something with the University of Arizona, is something that I do with a lot of pride. So thank you to all the professors, staff, the people behind the scenes, to all my colleagues, my cohort. It's a great opportunity to be here with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. All right, I had to do some math and Google mapping because I realized I might have given out that award for furthest away just a moment too soon, because we actually have somebody else who came all the way from Minnesota, right? Oh, okay. Never mind. But we do have somebody from Minnesota, Jen Carlson. Thank you for coming out and visiting, and we look forward to having you here later. All right, so that wraps up our regional panel. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our international panel. And let me see, I've got my notes here. We're running a little behind, so we're just going to keep moving. But if you need a break, feel free to go ahead and take one or get some water. We have Eliana Carrera, right? Is that our first? Eliana was an undergraduate of ours not that long ago, just in 2020. And after she graduated from the university with a bachelor's degree and having participated in our Guatemala Study Abroad program, she went on to volunteer, as far as I know, with the Peace Corps in Peru. And so we're looking forward to hearing from Eliana and what she's up to today. So Eliana, are you ready?
Can you hear me okay?
Test the mic one more time, Eliana.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. Awesome, am I good to go?
Go for it.
Great, okay, well, thank you so much for that introduction. As Colin said, I graduated in 2020, and I had such a positive experience at the Center for Latin American Studies, not only from my courses that were taught by great professors, but a lot of my experience outside of the classroom. As mentioned, I studied abroad in Guatemala, in Antigua, with our IDEAS program, and I studied there for one summer at first, and I was studying Spanish and human rights, and then the second summer, I got a FLAS scholarship and I studied the indigenous language of Cachiquel, which was a really great experience. And both of these really connected me to my late grandfather, Jorge, who was from Quetzaltenango, Guatemala. So I'm really thankful for that experience. I was also a member of the Latin American Studies student organization with Cristal, and I worked with Dr. Oglesby on my honors thesis, which was on memory projects in Guatemala regarding the Civil War. So I can't say enough about how much of a positive experience I had at the Center for Latin American Studies, but how that shaped my career and what I've been doing the past couple of years. I graduated during the COVID-19 pandemic, and as Colin mentioned, I was actually set to go on the Peace Corps in Peru, but unfortunately wasn't able to pursue that opportunity with the pandemic at that time, which was unfortunate, but I was able to take a lot of other opportunities because of that. So I worked with a lot of nonprofit organizations such as the Colibri Center for Human Rights, advocating for the lives disappeared in the US-Mexico border region. For the 3 years after that, I mainly spent a lot of my career working for the International Rescue Committee in Phoenix, Arizona. And I worked as a case assistant, as an intern, but most of my time there was with their Welcome Center program. And that is a 24/7 shelter for asylum seekers providing emergency services. So that's where I gained a lot of career experience. We served a lot of people from Latin America, a lot from indigenous communities as well, but also from all around the world. That population changed throughout the years, and I gained a lot of experience in program development and frontline work. So that's really my career that I've been doing the past couple of years. And then as of recent, I pursued a master's degree. I recently graduated with a master's in international migration and public policy from the London School of Economics. So a lot of my time at the Center for Latin American Studies really prepared me to pursue that master's degree. And was able to understand a lot more about migration in the European context. And I completed a dissertation project, and that was specifically on humanitarian actors and securitized borders, the US-Mexico border region where I'm from and where I did a lot of my professional work. So I worked with a lot of organizations based in Tucson, based in Phoenix through my network. So right now I'm currently living in London and I graduated in December. So I'm pursuing a lot of positions, applying a lot to anywhere I can get my foot in the door here in London in human rights, also supporting migrant populations here and different charity work. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be a part of this panel. And I also just hope to get to speak with some of you in the future.
Thank you, Eliana. Appreciate that. Great to hear from you. All right, now we went from a very recent alumni and we're going to go back for a blast from the past, right? From one that goes way back, one of our first foreign area officers to come through the program, as someone who spent a good amount of time in Tucson, who interned with the late Congressman Jim Colby, and has been, connected with the center for many years and even is here with us today in person. So Scott Kirtley, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And I'll hand you the mic.
All right, thank you very much. I just, by happenstance, I was able to get out here. I was actually planning to do this remotely, but had to come out here for some other things. I'm actually still a federal employee, so any opinions you hear expressed are only my own, and I will not comment on any abject disasters that are being visited upon us as we speak. So I have no opinion on that whatsoever. While I'm in front of you, one-on-one, we'll talk. Okay, I graduated in 1996. I came here. I was a non-traditional student, had been in the military. I had actually served in Panama and Honduras for like all of a day in El Salvador, and then learned or picked up on Spanish while I studied at a Academia de Idiomas in Mexico. This program actually kind of saved my life, if you will. I graduated from this. I figured years from now or years from then, I would be here with the local folks. And because I worked for the Arizona Attorney General, worked some migrant issues with her. I became an associate state school superintendent, and Raul actually set up a couple of talks with teachers from Sonora, and we had some discussions. And it was great because I got to introduce myself as the Viceministro de Educación de Arizona. So it was awesome. Yeah. Anyway, I was also a reserve officer, and after 9/11, everybody had to serve. I got called to active duty in 2003. Since I was an intelligence officer, I was teaching out at Fort Huachuca. I taught for about 3 months, and I got a call from the Pentagon. And we, the United States, had just invaded Iraq. They said, okay, look, we don't need you at Fort Huachuca, but we need you in active service in other places. We're going to send you to Afghanistan. I'm like, okay. 3 days later, the same officer calls me from the Pentagon, and he says, I got a weird question. Any chance you speak Spanish? Sí, yo puedo hablar español sin problema. It's like, we need advisors in Colombia that they've just declared Plan Colombia now part of this global war on terrorism. If you would rather go to Colombia than Afghanistan, it's like sold to an American. So I go to Colombia, and I actually served in the field. I used to keep Raul updated on some of the things that are going on. And Raul would send me a message, are you allowed to be telling me this stuff? It's like, yeah, it's nothing terribly super secret. But I became very involved with Colombia. I spent a year and a half in the field with the Colombian military. I met my beautiful wife, who's now from Bogota. I brought her here 20 years ago after we got married, showed her around the center, and she asked me, ¿Dónde están los colombianos? No hay colombianos aquí. No hay nada de Colombia en el centro. Well, I come back, and now the directora is colombiana, and then I see there's media colombiano, acabo de hablar con él, and some others. So it's awesome to see. She would be very happy to see that as well. So in that sense, the center saved me. I actually figured out what I could do with this degree. I then worked for U.S. Southern Command in their Colombia division, working on issues related to the conflict with the FARC, the ELN, and also with the Autodefensas and everything there. And then principally with the issue related to the 3 U.S. hostages that were there who were rescued in 2008. My team did work on some of the intelligence products that helped lead to their rescue. I then worked in Latin America and Honduras. I was in Honduras with the Joint Interagency Task Force South in 2009, and I happened to be there during the, let's call it, extra constitutional change of government that they went through at that time. So I got to actually live through a coup and live under martial law for a little while. That was wonderful. I then worked in Cartagena, Colombia for that same organization. And I happened to be there in 2012 during the Conference of the Americas when the U.S. Secret Service distinguished themselves so wonderfully from President Obama's team there. That happened about 3 blocks from my apartment. I came back to Arizona. I worked Homeland Security and became the cartel guy, working Homeland Security stuff out of Phoenix. Then went to New Jersey and still found myself working with Latin American issues because Elizabeth, New Jersey is like a centro de todos los colombianos de New Jersey and Nueva York. And during that first administration of this current administration, did not want to work Homeland Security things anymore. And I found a job with the Department of Defense again, working in Africa Command and working on programs throughout primarily Western Africa, and found that my Latin American studies actually came in handy because I was working the narcotics trade coming out of Peru, Colombia, Bolivia, through Brazil, through Western Africa. And then if you really want ajiaco, Senegal has got some places, by the way. You can find some Colombians living in West Africa. Don't know why they're living in West Africa, but they happen to be there. And in the summer of 2020, height of the pandemic, somebody calls me from U.S. Southern Command and says, look, the Department of Defense is trying to set up a project where we help Colombia establish a military intelligence system, much like we have in the United States, but we're trying to emphasize civilian control of military intelligence. We need somebody who knows Colombia, can speak Spanish, has an intelligence background, and also understands how to set up Department of Defense programs. We can't find anybody who can do all of those things except you. So we want you to do that. So I went through some specialized training and end up in Colombia. Now, you go, oh, this guy's got a military background. Let me assure all of you, if you equate me with any figure from literature or history, I would be like Catch-22's Captain Yossarian. That's been my relationship with the military. Even though I spent 25 years in uniform, that was really me. So just understand that. Now I get to Colombia, and now all of these officers who had been captains and majors, lieutenants, captains, and majors when I was in the field with them, they're now colonels and generals. So they see me and they're like, oh, hermano, usted puede ayudarnos con inteligencia. And what those uniformed officers were intent on doing is ensuring that they kept the civilians at bay, that they had no intention of relinquishing any control of military intelligence to them. That kind of went through. I was there for the end of the term of Ivan Duque, and then I happened to be there for the election of Presidente Gustavo Petro. And of course, everybody at the U.S. Embassy was afraid. Gustavo Petro, he's a leftist. Oh my God, we're going to die. He's going to end all programs with the United States. I found his administration and the people working for him, and that's Vice Ministro Alberto Lara, became a very, very good friend of mine. And that they were the best to work with. They were intrigued by the system we have, where at least up until that point, hopefully to continue, civilian control of military intelligence is paramount, that the military will always be secondary. Now, you can probably imagine how that went over with the militaries and the military folks. And they viewed me, traidor was probably one of their favorite things to say. But we at least established the system. I think back on the studies, well, the seminars with Raul when we were in the little house on the other side of Speedway. Yeah. Paul Buchanan was one of my professors back in those days. Dr. Meyer was a great, great influence on me. Taught me some academic discipline that I so badly needed back in those days. But this program is really what sort of set the path for me. I had no clue where I was going to go with this. But one thing I'll leave you with is now my wife and I, beautiful wife and I have been married 20 years. And I always tell my suegra, like, otra familia arruinada por Plan Colombia. Qué triste. Okay. Anyway, but thank you all. It's an honor to be here, and I'm extremely honored to be counted amongst the distinguished folks who are here today. So thank you so much.
All right. So that was great. Thanks, Scott. We appreciate it. And now we're going to move on to another distinguished alumni who's joining us, I believe, from Guadalajara, Mexico. Is Della with us online? Yeah, Della's there. Great. So Della Burke is a master's alumni from 2004, and she's now living and working in Guadalajara and at the ITESO University down there. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Della. You ready?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We hear you. Perfect.
Excellent. Thanks. Thank you so much for the invitation. I've been listening to the other panelists and the other presentations, and I'm finding some echoes along the lines of who we are as LAS alumni. And so that's been really, really lovely to hear and sort of sparking some memories for me as well. Like Colin said, I am working at ITESO. It's the Jesuit University of Guadalajara. And I have been living in Guadalajara for the last 17 plus years. I was part of the cohort for the MA degree, as Colin said, from 2002 to 2004. And so Elena and Katie were sort of in the cohort one step ahead of us, and it was lovely to be able to look up to them when I started my program, and to be intimidated in the best academic way by what they were doing. And I have to say, I was intimidated in an entirely different way by the salsa dancing. But yeah, so it's been lovely to see some familiar faces in the presentations. I also, before my master's degree, I came through working at the Florence Project. So that was my first job out of college. And I was completely overwhelmed by what was happening in Arizona, in Latin America, as far as what I could see from the migrants who are coming through the detention center, the stories that were being told in the office, the incredible work that the lawyers were doing. and I felt completely unprepared. And it was one of the impetus for me to go into a master's degree. So I left that job, got another job, but at the same time that I got the other job, knew that I needed to get a master's degree in something that would help me to sort of figure out what was going on in Central America, because I just didn't understand. And I had been bouncing back and forth between working on migrant issues and working in with either lawyers who were working on migration issues or working in centers to support migrants in a couple of different areas, and also working in international education. So in the field of like study abroad and that kind of thing in universities. And so I decided to go to LAS in part because I wanted to be physically next to the border, and in part because I wanted to go back to this area of Arizona where I was seeing all of this Central American migration issue happening, and try and figure things out. I was impacted incredibly. My very first semester, I was very lucky that I ran into an LAS alum right before I went into the program, and I asked her, what do I need to know, or who do I need to take? What classes do I need to take to set me up? And she said, in your first semester, you need to take Burt Berrickman's class. And of course it was over enrolled. And so I went into his office and asked him for special permission to take his class, even though it was over enrolled. And I don't know how, but I managed to get into his class. And it absolutely sort of blew the doors off of everything that I thought that I knew about Latin America and Latin American history, and the way to teach Latin American history, and my preconceived notions that I didn't like history because I'd had such terrible history teachers before. So Burt Berrickman really, really turned me around in the best possible ways. And like Juan Carlos said, I tried to steal from the best. So when I first started teaching, I looked over my syllabus from Burt Berrickman's class and tried to steal all the best ideas that he had. I have to say that the books that I bought for Liz Oglesby's class, the syllabus and class notes from Burt Berrickman's class, those were part of the selection for the international move that I made when I moved from California to Guadalajara 17 years ago. And I still have those documents in those books. They've been incredibly impactful for me. And I had to say that those discussions and those classes and the things around them, the field trips and like Elena was saying, going to Mexico for lunch, and like that kind of interaction just really set my brain on fire in all the best ways. And so I was able to take that and sort of plug that into different parts of my life in different moments. I also was one of the students who was not convinced about Portuguese for Spanish speakers, and it was incredibly useful. And in all of the unexpected ways that I was like, well, I got to fulfill a requirement. It's fine. And last year I was invited to go to Sao Paulo to give a workshop and didn't think twice about it. Like, I brushed up on the things that I already had in my brain and was able to do, I didn't give the workshop in Portuguese, but I was able to get along, and that was incredible because of that setup. I now work at a Jesuit university. I am not Catholic, although I live in a Catholic country now, but I was set up for that by taking class with Dr. Sawa, where we needed to learn about Latin American intellectuals and the left, and I chose one of the martyrs of the UCA in El Salvador as one of my people to research, and learned all about Jesuits and their education system. And now I work in one of the sister universities of the UCA El Salvador. And I, all of the things about migration topics and Mexican migration and the history of Mexican migration, and the fact that I now live in Guadalajara, and Jalisco is one of the historical out-migration states of Mexico, comes to use all the time. So yeah, I've been able to teach a class called Interculturalism at ITESO, and I've used a lot of the resources from Latin American Studies to set up that class. We talk a lot about Mexican American culture because, to my surprise, Mexicans didn't in the university where I teach don't really understand Mexican Americans. And so I was able to pull in the class information I had from Raquel Rubio Goldsmith's class to be able to teach them about what their cousins are like, why their cousins have certain ways of being. And so it's really, really been impactful in my life and continues to be impactful in my life. My latest adventure is that a couple of months ago, I went to Mexico City and turned in all the documentation, all of the copies, and took the Mexican culture and history exam in order to become a naturalized Mexican citizen. And one of the test questions was something that I knew because of my master's degree. So I just wanted to thank Colin and everyone else, Crystal, and all of the organizers, and for the invitation. Congratulations on the 50-year anniversary. I wish you all the best for the future, and I'm your biggest fan. Thanks.
Thanks, Della. We really appreciate that. And if anybody's interested in learning Nahuatl, Della's the person to talk to. She's got a great program. It's a FLOSS eligible program for students that are interested in indigenous languages. So we'll send you down to Guadalajara. All right, so next we have with us Bobby Alvarez on Zoom. Bobby was a returned Peace Corps volunteer and Coverdale Fellow. He got his master's with us as well as a master's in public administration in the dual degree program back in 2016. And he's been doing great things ever since. He spent some time in Washington, D.C., and we're going to hear what he's up to lately. So, Bobby, thank you for being with us. It's great to see you.
All right, great. It's great to see
Sounds
you
good.
too as well, Colin. Sorry, my internet's been a little spotty right when I'm about to speak. So, Colin, great to see you. Marcela, I saw you walking around earlier. It's great to see you as well. Really happy to see the Center for Latin American Studies continue to grow and thrive under your stewardship. I'm also a current federal employee like Scott, so I need to give a quick disclosure that any opinions expressed are mine solely and are not a reflection of the federal government. All right, so as Colin mentioned, I got my MA in Latin American Studies, and I was dual degree with MPA. Had an amazing time in the program, had the opportunity to receive a FLOSS fellowship, which took me down to Fortaleza, Brazil, during the World Cup. And that was really the seeds of really the foundation for my thesis research, which was looking at the socioeconomic impacts of the World Cup in Fortaleza, Brazil. So I had the opportunity to learn Portuguese, and then I got a Tinker Fellowship the following summer to actually be able to go and do some ethnographic research and interviews in some of the periférico and what would be the equivalent of the favelas in Fortaleza, which was an amazing experience and really set the tone for me and my professional kind of perspectives moving forward. After I graduated in 2016, I obtained a public policy Fulbright fellowship, and I was able to work at the Ministry of Education in Guatemala as a special advisor in the Vice Despacho de Diseño y Verificación de la Calidad Educativa, so design and verification of educational quality. Had the opportunity to work on two national programs, one in food security, which was tied to legislation that was passed that made access to a healthy meal for Guatemalan children in public schools a fundamental human right. So I got to work on developing some of the benchmarks for that and some of the programmatic implementation side. And then also on another program called Sinai, which was really a restructuring of the public education system in Guatemala, which, you know, gave me some great insight into, you know, some of the amazing work being done by so many people within the Guatemalan government. I was really proud to work at that time, because that was right after the president and vice president had gone down as a result of these mass popular protests that took place in Guatemala City. And so it really felt like that new government was coming in with a mandate for positive change. And a lot of positive things did take place under that administration. And I saw firsthand a lot of the positive work, even though sadly, the president at that time, the new president, Jimmy Morales, turned out to have his hands in some cookie jars as well. But we'll move on from that. After I left Guatemala, I had the opportunity to do some additional nonprofit work focused on drug demand reduction and substance misuse prevention at the community level, working with community-based coalitions and strategic planning. That's where a lot of my work in DC took place. I oversaw all of our youth programs and youth leadership development as well across all 50 states. And then also was the catalyst for taking our youth leadership programs overseas, expanding first into Latin America and then eventually into the Philippines and then also into East Africa. After a few years doing nonprofit work, I moved on and became a foreign service officer with the U.S. Department of State. My first tour I served in Ciudad Juarez. I was working on a lot of immigration work. Big part of the work was identifying fraud rings that were taking advantage of people who were trying to go through the legal immigration process, which is really rampant, as a lot of folks know. People out there just taking advantage of the vulnerable. Another project that we did while out there, which I'm really proud of, was worked with an NGO that was focused in one of the areas of Ciudad Juarez that had the highest rates of violence against women, as well as femicide. And worked with an NGO, and we provided training for women who were survivors of domestic violence. And then we also provided additional training for incarcerated women. So really cool work that took place within that context. And that was interesting because I wasn't sure that I'd be able to do that kind of work and really express, that aspect of work that I was so passionate about within the State Department. So I was really happy to be able to find those avenues. I'm currently, as of about 6 months ago, serving in Morocco. It's getting a little late here, about 10:45. But working here in Morocco, I've also had the opportunity to do some excellent work and really participate in some cool projects. One of which, we're working to target communities that had previously been targeted by extremist groups for recruitment. And these are areas that you see kind of some overlap in terms of what you see situations of escasos recursos in Latin America, low economic opportunities, lack of access to state services. Those difficulties in these areas really turn into hotbeds for extremist recruitment. So we're doing a lot of work with young people, giving them alternative avenues, different types of trainings in civic discourse and creative industries as well, including hip hop as well as some DJ classes. So also having the opportunity to do some cool work there in addition to a lot of other projects. Latin American studies really helped me to, coming from Peace Corps, and I had done a lot of community work before graduate school, but Latin American studies really provided me with a lot of the intellectual rigor and a lot of the larger frameworks that I needed to really be able to systematically analyze a lot of what I was already seeing. I felt that it gave me the tools necessary to really pull these things apart and look at them critically, as opposed to when you're in the field, when you're in the community doing the work, sometimes you can lose track of the big picture. So Latin American studies really helped me to focus in on that big picture while also emphasizing the importance and the role of grassroots activism and the importance of engaging people on a human to human level. The other thing that it really taught me was the importance of historical context and really understanding the present by looking back at everything that took place in order to bring us to this present situation that we're in. And that has been something that served me ever since I graduated. Before coming here to Morocco, I didn't have any experience in the region, and it really helped me to start looking at different avenues of analysis. I still look at things oftentimes through the lens of Latin America. Even being here in Morocco, I still see a lot of similarities with Mexico. We can talk about that a little bit later. If anyone would like to, but Latin American studies is really, parte de mi corazón. Take it with me everywhere, regardless of where I end up in the world. And just very thankful for the opportunities that I was given by the Center for Latin American Studies. And I continue to promote and talk about it as much as possible. Thank you for allowing me to speak with everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Thank you very much, Bobby. All right, so we'll go from one dual degree to another. We got a dual degree student who earned his master's with us in 2004, as well as a law degree from the law school. And he's still at the law school, right? So he's going to tell us a little about what he's doing there, as well as what he's doing at the Federal Public Defender's Office here in Tucson. So Jay Sager, thank you very much.
Thank you, Colin. It's been very interesting to hear all the different backgrounds of people who've gone through this program. And what I see as the common threads are, one, it's the passion that people have for the topic that they're engaged in, and then two, the interdisciplinary nature of it, because none of what we've all studied or learned about, or those that you've heard from, could really approach these issues without knowing more about all of the different disciplines that are involved. And that's doing this dual degree program with the law school. You see law students are very much kind of focused on what is that statute I need to look at, or not everybody, but there is more of this kind of fine point of it. And what Latin American Studies does is bring you that kind of overall perspective that whatever the work you end up going into really is important to really engage with it and understand it better. My journey to get into going through Latin American Studies began a little earlier, because I did my undergraduate in psychology, and I had really no idea that I would end up going into this, the work that I do now. But I did a study abroad in Chile in my senior year undergraduate. And one of the professors there wanted us to participate in the September 11th, 1973. I know September 11th has its own important date here in the United States as well, but September 11th, 1973 in Chile is the anniversary of the military coup. And so we were supposed to go, and we did participate in a march that then went to Salvador Allende's grave. And at that time, in true dictatorial fashion, Pinochet had lost the referendum on his continued dictatorship presidency. And so he then became the head of installed himself as head of the army for 8 years. And so he was head of the army at the time I was there. And then he was going to become a senador vitalicio after that, make himself senator for life. Because he was still head of the army, they were continuing to do this march to Allende's grave. And so just that experience really was kind of woke a lot of things up for me. And, you had the guanacos, which is their kind of military police tanks spraying out water at people. And they've got the tear gas that they're shooting at people. And it's that kind of experience. You see that in another country, and it really, I'm sure for many of you as well, you have this kind of experience that wakes something up for you. So I had been studying, neuroscience, neuropsychology, and things like that. And then I went back to school, and it just was totally kind of dead and cold to me. I then, and I should also note that that same date, September 11th, is when I met my wife in Chile. We happened to be riding the same bus together. She was going to her home city of Rancagua. So that ended up also really changing my life as well. But I then lived in Spain for a year. I was teaching there, teaching English there. And then I was looking at different graduate programs, and there were the Latin American Studies programs are really what was kind of sticking out to me. So then when I came back to the US, I applied amongst other programs to Latin American Studies at the U of A. And I remember meeting with Raul Saba. Actually, there was some event at the law school, and we went over there, and he was telling me about a new program, which was this dual degree program. And I was thinking, oh, that's great. I could do the interest of Latin American Studies, but then maybe there's something I could do with a law degree afterward. And so the way at that point it was just kind of getting started. So Raul explained it a little bit to me, but I ended up doing 1 year of Latin American Studies curriculum, and then 1 year of the first year of law school, and then the last 2 years were a combination of both. And that was really interesting to be able to go back and forth and go to class at the law school while also being in classes Latin American Studies. And I was also in the same group with Juan Carlos, Elena, and Katie, and Jen, and many others. I have so many good memories from that time period. And so I ended up then going to the Pima County Public Defender's Office. I worked at in the Spanish-speaking team. And so we had a lot of cases where there were people coming from Mexico who had, legal permanent residents, but then also people who were undocumented. And their immigration consequences of the criminal convictions was a big part of what we were doing there. Then after about 3 years, I started working at the Federal Public Defender's Office. I've been there since 2008, so 17 years there. I've been a supervisor there since 2021, so I've kind of moved in a little bit different role. But we're handling all these cases that have to do with illegal immigration, have to do with drug trafficking, and so much. Even though there was a professor, Joel Stillerman, who I remember as well from that time period, where focused on Southern Cone and everything, but just being here in Tucson, you really are, as I say to my students when they come in for the class, I teach federal border crimes every fall, is that we're really at the epicenter of all of these issues. I mean, so many articles nationwide. Tucson is right at the beginning of where they're going to address these issues from. And so it's been very much the type of work that I didn't know I wanted to do, but I've gotten so deep into it. And it has so much to do with getting to know our clients and the people coming from Mexico, coming from Central America, and from other places with illegal reentry cases, drug trafficking cases. Sometimes the defense in a drug trafficking case is duress, and they were being forced because of the violence and instability and the cartel issues going on in Mexico. So the more you know about that, obviously, the more you're going to be able to develop arguments related to it. And, for sentencing arguments, knowing the country conditions and knowing what's going on in the home country, you're then hopefully letting the judge know a little bit more about that and hopefully get a better sentence for your client. So it's been incredibly rewarding time being at the Latin American Studies program. I'm glad that I'm still somewhat connected. I just had lunch with Colin a couple months ago. I remember doing a guest speaker gig one time with Marcella. And I enjoy continuing to have this involvement with Latin American Studies. And it's definitely so much a part of me and how I kind of ended up doing the work that I'm doing.
Great. Thank you, Jay. Appreciate that. All right, we're down to our last speaker. And I think this is maybe the only speaker that I don't know personally, that I've never met in person. So but I'm really excited to welcome Lara White online on Zoom with us today. And she works for the International Organization for Migration. So I'm going to hand it over to her now. And Lara, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Okay, super. Well, first of all, thanks for the invitation. I am working for the International Organization for Migration, otherwise known as the UN Migration Agency. Also will say a bit of a disclaimer that all of the opinions that I may provide are mine and mine alone and not those of IOM. But just to start off, I graduated with a master's degree in Latin American Studies in 1999. I also, and so interesting listening to the other speakers, I took the scenic route. I did an additional year because I was also having a really, really great time. I came to this master's program after completing an undergraduate degree in international development. Graduating right at the same time, I'm from Canada, right at the same time that the Canadian government put a 8-year what turned out to be an 8-year hiring freeze. So there were no jobs really in international development in Canada. So I continued on with another interdisciplinary degree, and really under the great tutelage of Raul Saba and Diana Liverman, who had an incredible amount of patience for me. And as I was trying to find my way in a very non-linear way into a career, what I really loved about the program is that, well, first of all, academic excellence. I had the amazing opportunity to work with real thought leaders and leading intellects in a variety of different fields. And that has served me in my career so tremendously well. I would be remiss without mentioning Jacqueline Sharkey, who took me under her wing from the journalism school, really taught me a lot about critical thinking, and I think was the first professor who really showed me what when I was writing well and when I wasn't writing well. So taught me a lot about writing. And also this was kind of carried forward some of my undergraduate work, which was looking at US foreign policy and how the media impacts foreign policy decision-making. This, of course, being well before social media, so completely different landscape now. I also worked with Alan Whiting, did a course on political risk analysis, which I use all the time. The learnings from the practical application of political risk analysis. Did a really good course with Spike Peterson on feminism, postmodernism, and state theory, which really helped kind of shake up my own preconceived notions about the way that the world works and the way that the policy machinery works. And then also David Gibbs, who really gave me an amazing opportunity to feel comfortable being a political economist, and also who gave me an opportunity to go to the UK and present on a panel with the British International Studies Association. And honestly, I think that was one of the first times that I gave a presentation to a very large group of people. So it was a learning experience in and of itself. But I have to say that, you know, through my academic career at the University of Arizona, and in this program in particular, it was really about critical thinking. Also, I mean, was definitely drawn to it because of the anchoring in social justice. And so that academic environment was really, really good for me as somebody who didn't really know what they wanted to do and wasn't sure where they were going to go next. So the second point I would say is that I had an amazing opportunity to work through various graduate assistantships. I was one of the TAs who worked on a core course for Latin American studies, a core undergraduate course. And so curriculum design has served me. I've also, in my experience as working for the government of Canada, I've been a corporate trainer. So having that experience of being able to develop a course was really important. I did research with Jacqueline Sharkey. That was also really an amazing experience. And then I think really formatively, I was given the opportunity to go and work for the Udall Center for Studies in Public Policy and also the Morris Udall Foundation. And I have to say that that was a real turning point in my career, because it was the first time, because I knew at this point I wasn't going to go on academically, that I wanted to be a practitioner of some kind. And it was Mo Udall's legacy and this commitment to civility and integrity and consensus building that really made me feel comfortable with wanting to go into the public service. And so working for the Morris Udall Foundation, which is an executive branch agency, and then moving on to the government of Canada, and then later on into the international public service within the UN. But through that experience, I also got to work in the founding years of the U.S. Institute for Environmental Conflict Resolution, which I know has now been renamed after Senator John McCain. And that was that experience, and being surrounded by practitioners in environmental conflict resolution really helped me later in my career as we were building initiatives that were very much consensus-based, multi-stakeholder initiatives to support ethical recruitment of migrant workers. And so those learnings really carried forward for me. And then I think the last point, because I know I'm the last speaker and everyone wants to go and have the party that I wish I could go to, the party that I wish I could be there for. But I think the third probably point that I like to make is just that, and this is what I tell people, junior staff people who come under my wing or interns, is that, you know, when they ask me, Laura, how did you end up where you are in your career? And I was like, you couldn't have planned it. It was really about taking chances, about seeing opportunities, and that this journey is not linear. So I think Spike Peterson's message carried forward in postmodernism and state theory, but also applied to my own career. So what brought me back to Latin America, though, was when I was working for the government of Canada. I was an adjudicator and policy analyst with the Employment Insurance Program. And then I ended up getting an opportunity to work for the Seasonal Agricultural Worker Program in Canada. And that brought me to looking at managed migration and migration governance related to agricultural workers who are coming from Mexico as well as parts of the Caribbean. I also got to work with stakeholders in Guatemala in the building of those migration corridors, also for seasonal and non-seasonal agricultural work. That then led me to an opportunity for a secondment with IOM, which ended up, there was a huge downsizing in the Canadian public administration in 2013. 20,000 people lost their jobs. And I took a buyout at that point and decided to stay, took a chance and decided to stay with IOM. And at that point, really focusing work on protecting the rights of migrant workers, particularly in supply chains, looking at how to promote through improved governance and management systems, ethical recruitment and decent work for migrant workers, looking at promoting better labor migration governance. So I got the opportunity to be part of IOM's team that was supporting the development and drafting of the Global Compact for migration. So that was an amazing experience. And then I got to actually go to Guatemala. I mean, my career has taken me from Geneva to, well, I was in Southeast Asia and South Asia, covering 40 countries in Asia and the Pacific. And then I went to Afghanistan and then later on taking smaller contracts in Tajikistan, Guatemala, Romania, Vietnam, Malaysia. So I've been very much working globally, but the lessons learned of the experience gained through my work through the the Center for Latin American Studies was really really pivotal. And currently I'm now stationed in Beirut, and I'm working on, again, the protection of migrant workers, but also finding durable solutions for Syrian refugees through economic and employment related pathways. And that's it for me. I just wanted to say that this is a really timely day, because in Canada, it's the 40th anniversary of Refugee Rights Day. So I'd like to end my presentation with a salute to that, and remembering that we should be protecting migrants and refugees no matter where they are, and understanding the benefits of migration. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lara. Thank you so much, everyone else who presented today, all of our panelists, all of our audience. We really appreciate you being here. That was so, amazing. It was meaningful. It was impactful. I learned so much in this brief time with all of you, and I really enjoyed hearing what you're up to lately, and also, what LAS meant to you guys as well. And I'm incredibly proud to have been just a small part, right, of this story, and helping facilitate the amazing accomplishments and accolades by all of our students, by our faculty and our staff over the last 20 years that I've been here. And I'm really excited to celebrate our 50th anniversary and help usher in a new era of LAS. So I hope to see everybody here right across the Student Union. We're in the northeast corner. We're heading over to the southwest corner to Cork and Craft is the name of the place here and part of the Student Union. And we'll have a happy hour reception, some light bites there. So please join us again, just in the opposite corner at Cork and Craft. And then we hope to see many of you tonight at the Whistle Stop Depot for the Pachanga. And then finally, tomorrow, our final event, a throwback asado en el parque at the Hoffman Park at Southeast Broadway and Swan, near Jay's old place, right around the corner. So anyway, thank you again, everyone, for being here. We really appreciate it. And we invite you to join us for some food and drinks at Cork and Craft right now.